Thomas Blackwood, Part 7, Final Trial in Cosmic Horror. Chapter 1, After the Sky Died. The sky has no birds. Thomas walks through landscapes that remember being somewhere else. His footsteps echo in towns where the windows watch but no one looks back, where street signs point to places that ceased existing when the gate began to open. The air tastes of copper and forgetting, and when he breathes, sometimes the breath that comes out isn't his own. He carries three things that should not be carried together. A staff of black wood that remembers what Thomas forgets. When he grips it, voices whisper the names of everyone he has ever been. Thomas the orphan, Thomas the student, Thomas the bridge, Thomas the vessel, Thomas the key. The staff knows them all, even the ones he has not been yet. A mirror, cracked down the center like a broken face. It shows not what stands before it, but what follows behind. In its fractured surface, Thomas glimpses shapes that move when he moves, stop when he stops, and continue walking when he tries to stand still. They wear faces he recognizes but cannot name, faces that flicker between familiar and impossible. A ring of tarnished silver that erases the wearer from memory. When Thomas slides it onto his finger, the world forgets he exists. Conversations stop mid-sentence as speakers lose the thread of what they were saying. Footprints vanish from snow. His reflection disappears from windows. Even his shadow abandons him, pooling at his feet like spilled ink before seeping into the ground. He knows these artifacts are forbidden, knows that carrying them together violates laws older than the ones carved in school corridors or whispered in asylum walls. But the world is ending, has been ending since he first opened a door that should have stayed closed, and forbidden things are the only tools left for forbidden work. Then do not wear the ring unless you're ready to vanish. Thomas has been ready since he learned his name was a lie, and a staff remembers what you forget. He has forgotten so much. Sometimes he thinks forgetting is the only mercy left. The mirror shows who follows. Something has been following him since the chapel of the Black Alchemist. Multiple somethings. They move in the periphery of vision, always 3 steps behind, always watching. Don't speak while carrying two. Thomas speaks anyway. The silence is worse than the words that come out wrong. Never look at them all at once. He hasn't tried, yet. If something calls from inside the mirror, it's already out. Nothing calls from inside the mirror. That's the problem. To the end isn't after the gate, it's before it. This, Thomas suspects, might be the only rule that matters. The road he follows exists only when he's walking on it. Behind him, the path dissolves into gray nothing. Ahead, it materializes out of possibility, each step creating the next section of ground to stand on. Sometimes the road remembers being a river, and Thomas's boots splash through water that isn't there. Sometimes it remembers being sky, and he walks on air that feels solid only because it thinks it should. The landscape around him shifts like a fever dream. He passes through a forest where the trees grow downward, their roots reaching toward empty sky, their branches burrowing deep into earth that bleeds sap when wounded. He crosses a desert of broken mirrors where his reflections move independently, some running ahead, others falling behind, all of them carrying different versions of the 3 artifacts. In the distance, always in the distance, the gate waits. Thomas cannot see it clearly. His eyes slide away whenever he tries to focus on it directly. But he knows it's there, knows it has been there since before he was born, knows it has been calling to him in voices that wear his parents' faces and speak his true name, the one carved into stone beneath schools that teach impossible subjects. The gate is not a door. It is not an arch or portal or threshold. It is the place where the world admits it has always been broken, where reality stops pretending to make sense. It is the end of all stories and the beginning of silence. Thomas knows this because the Black Alchemist told him, in dreams that feel more real than walking, the voice comes from the staff sometimes, or from the mirror, or from the spaces between his thoughts where other people's memories have taken root. When you were made for this, the voice whispers, plan-shaped and guided and broken and remade for this single purpose. You are the key that opens. You are the bridge that connects. You are the ending that allows new beginnings. Thomas doesn't remember agreeing to be any of those things, but agreement, he has learned, was never required. Chapter 2. The Town of Echoes. On the third day of walking, or perhaps the third year, time moves strangely when the sky is dead. Thomas comes to a town that knows his name. The sign at the edge of the settlement reads, "Welcome to Millbrook." But underneath, in letters that shift when he's not looking directly at them, it says, "Welcome home, Thomas Blackwood." The streets are empty but not abandoned. Curtains twitch in windows. Shadows move behind glass. The sound of conversation drifts from buildings that should be vacant. But when Thomas approaches the sources of these sounds, he finds only silence and rooms where dust patterns suggest furniture has been recently moved. In the town square stands a statue that wasn't there when Thomas entered the settlement. It depicts a young man holding three objects, a staff, a mirror, and a ring. The face is his own, but older, worn by experiences he hasn't had yet. The inscription at the base reads, "For services to the end of the world." Thomas stares at the statue for a long time. The bronze figure stares back with eyes that seem more alive than metal should allow. "You're early," says a voice behind him. Thomas turns but sees no one. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, carried on wind that doesn't disturb the leaves of the single tree growing beside the statue. "Early for what?" he asks. "The celebration, the recognition ceremony. The moment when the town acknowledges what you've accomplished." The voice is gentle, paternal, familiar in a way that makes Thomas's chest tight with longing he doesn't understand. "You've carried your burden so far, Thomas, so very far. I haven't finished yet. Haven't you? Look around you. Really look." Thomas looks. The empty streets, the watching windows, the statue in his honor. And then he sees what he missed before. The town isn't empty because its residents are hiding. It's empty because its residents are dead. Bodies lie in doorways, slumped over steering wheels, collapsed on sidewalks. They don't look diseased or injured. They look finished, complete, as if they simply reached the end of their purpose and stopped. "They were waiting for you," the voice explains, "all of them, waiting for the moment when the gate would open and their vigil would be complete. When you passed through their town, their duty ended. They could finally rest." Thomas grips the staff tighter. It grows warm in his hand, and suddenly he can remember things that haven't happened yet. Walking through other towns, other communities of the dead, all of them arranged like stations on a pilgrimage route he never chose to follow. "How many?" he whispers. "Every settlement between here and the gate. Thousands of people who lived their entire lives for the sole purpose of being in the right place when you needed to pass through. Their deaths mark your progress, Thomas. Their sacrifice makes your journey possible." The ring on Thomas's finger grows cold. Without conscious decision, he slides it off, and suddenly the town remembers he exists. But the recognition brings no comfort, only the weight of all those who died simply because he walked past their doors. In the mirror at his side, Thomas glimpses movement. The followers who shadow his steps have entered the town square. They gather around the statue, not quite solid, not quite there, but more present than they've been since he began carrying the cracked glass. One of them approaches close enough that Thomas can make out features. A young man with pale eyes and dark hair, wearing the uniform of a school that should no longer exist. "Marcus?" Thomas whispers. The figure nods but doesn't speak. Can't speak, Thomas realizes. The mirror only shows. It doesn't carry voices. But the recognition is mutual. Marcus Whitmore, his friend from Eildor Hollow, the boy who tried to help him understand the rules before reality stopped following them entirely. Other figures emerge from the mirror's reflection. Sebastian Ashford, David from the library, Professor Ashcroft with her winter ice eyes, even the headmaster in his kind mask that hid centuries of hunger. All of them watching Thomas with expressions of expectation. "They follow you because you freed them," the voice explains. "When you broke the binding spells, when you spoke the words that unmade their prison, you became responsible for their souls. They cannot rest until you complete what you began. I didn't ask for that responsibility. Responsibility is rarely asked for. It simply is." Thomas looks at the staff in his hands. In its dark wood, he can see reflections of every choice that led him here. Every door opened, every rule broken, every name learned and forgotten. The Black Alchemist's final lesson echoes through the grain. And power is not about what you can do. It's about what you must do. The gate, Thomas says. How much further? You already know. Thomas does know, has always known since the first moment he touched the invitation stitched with human hair. The gate isn't a destination, it's a condition. A state of being that moves with him, always just ahead, always just out of reach, until the moment when reaching it becomes inevitable. And then you remember what you were made for. Thomas wants to ask more questions, but the words stick in his throat. Some knowledge can only be earned through experience, and some experiences can only be survived once. He puts the ring back on his finger and watches the town forget him again. But the dead remain dead, and the statue remains in his honor, and in the mirror at his side, the spirits of Eildor Hollow continue their patient vigil. Thomas leaves Millbrook by a road that didn't exist when he entered it. Behind him, the town settles into the silence of completion. Ahead, the gate waits with the patience of something that has always known how this story ends. Chapter 3. The Upside-Down Forest. The forest grows in the wrong direction. Thomas discovers this when he tries to shelter beneath what he thinks is a tree, only to find himself standing among roots that twist up toward a sky that has forgotten how to hold light. The trunks descend into earth like enormous wooden drills, boring down through soil and stone toward some impossible foundation. The canopy spreads below his feet, a ceiling of leaves and branches that rustles with the movement of things that might be birds, if birds flew through dirt instead of air. When Thomas looks down, he sees glimpses of sky through the gaps between leaves, not reflected sky, but actual sky, as if the world has folded itself inside out. The staff in his hand grows warm as he navigates this inverted wilderness. It remembers forests, Thomas realizes. Remembers when trees grew up instead of down, when roots anchored things in earth instead of air. The wood vibrates with the memory of normalcy, and Thomas finds himself following that vibration like a compass needle pointing toward sanity. But sanity is not his destination. The mirror at his side shows the forest as it should be. Trees reaching toward light, roots buried in darkness, a natural order that makes sense. But when Thomas looks up from the mirror to compare it with reality, he sees that his followers have adapted to the inversion. They walk on the canopy below as if it were solid ground, their footsteps causing leaves to rustle and branches to bend. They inhabit the mirror's reflection of the world as it was before he began breaking it. Don't speak while carrying two, the rule whispers in his memory. But Thomas has been speaking, hasn't he? Every step he takes is a word in a language older than speech. Every breath is a syllable in an incantation he didn't mean to begin. What am I saying? He asks the empty air. The Black Alchemist's voice answers from somewhere in the twisted wood. On you are naming the end of things. Every broken rule, every crossed threshold, every choice that led you deeper into impossibility. They are all words in the final spell. You have been speaking it since the day you opened the first door. Thomas stops walking. Around him, the inverted forest continues its patient growth toward the center of the earth. What happens when the spell is complete? What do you think happens when you speak the true name of the end of the world? Thomas doesn't want to know, but the staff remembers, and its memories bleed into his consciousness. Civilizations that spoke themselves out of existence. Realities that collapsed under the weight of their own impossibility. Universes that ended not with explosion or decay, but with a single word that unmade everything that had ever been. The ring on his finger whispers seductively, "Put me on. Let the world forget you. Let yourself forget the world. End this before it becomes unstoppable." Thomas slides the ring onto his finger. The world forgets him instantly. The inverted forest continues growing without his presence to witness it. The staff falls from his vanished hand and clatters among the roots. The mirror tumbles after it, its cracked surface reflecting nothing because there is nothing there to reflect. For a moment, an hour, a lifetime, Thomas experiences the peace of non-existence. No responsibility, no burden, no followers watching him with eyes full of impossible hope. No gate waiting in the distance like a cosmic mouth ready to swallow everything he has ever loved. But then he remembers, the world is ending, whether he exists or not. His erasure from memory doesn't erase the work he has already done, the doors he has already opened, the spells he has already spoken. The gate still waits. The Black Alchemist's plan still unfolds. The only difference is that now no one will remember who to blame when reality collapses. Thomas removes the ring. The world remembers him with a sound like thunder played backward. The staff leaps into his hand as if it had been waiting. The mirror settles at his side, its surface showing not his followers but his own reflection. Older, scarred, carrying eyes that have seen the end of hope. You cannot escape what you are, the Black Alchemist observes from the depths of the wood. You can only delay the inevitable recognition. I never wanted this. Want is irrelevant. You were made for this purpose before you were born. Your parents were chosen for their bloodline. Your childhood was orchestrated to produce the necessary trauma. Your education was designed to break you in precisely the right ways. The voice grows closer, more intimate. Every moment of your life has been a step toward this forest, this choice, this recognition of what you truly are. Thomas looks around at the inverted trees, at the sky that spreads below his feet, at the natural world turned inside out by his mere presence in it. He thinks of Millbrook, where thousands of people lived and died simply to mark his passage. He thinks of Eildor Hollow, where students were consumed to power a machine he helped to break. He thinks of all the institutions and people and places that have been changed or destroyed simply because he existed near them. I'm not just a key or a bridge, he realizes. I'm a weapon. The final weapon, the Black Alchemist confirms, designed to end one reality so that another can begin. You are the word that unmakes. You are the silence that follows the last song. In the mirror, Thomas's followers gather in a circle around his reflection. They reach out toward the cracked glass as if trying to touch him across the barrier between what is and what was. Their faces are no longer expectant. They are afraid. They know what he is becoming. Thomas grips the staff and mirror tighter, feeling the weight of the ring on his finger like a promise of escape he will never be strong enough to accept. The inverted forest stretches ahead of him, growing down toward a sky that holds the gate like a dying star. Behind him, reality continues to collapse under the weight of his footsteps. Ahead, the end of everything waits with the patience of gravity. Chapter 4. The Flooded Sky Vault. The sky has developed a leak. Thomas emerges from the upside-down forest to find himself standing on the shore of an ocean that hangs above his head. Water drips down in perfect spheres, each drop containing miniature worlds that shatter against the ground with sounds like breaking crystal. The inverted sea stretches across the entire dome of heaven, held in place by forces that shouldn't exist, illuminated by a sun that drowns without ever going out. Impossible, Thomas whispers, then laughs at his own naivety. Everything has been impossible since he first stepped through the door at Greystone Orphanage. Impossible is the only constant in his world now. The staff in his hand remembers skies that held only air and light. It vibrates with frustrated memory, trying to convince reality to remember how things should be. But reality has learned to ignore such suggestions. It has found something more interesting than physics, the pure chaos of narrative causality, where events follow story logic instead of natural law. In the mirror at his side, Thomas watches his followers struggle with the contradictory environment. They exist in the reflection of the world as it was, where skies hold air and seas stay on the ground. But their reflected selves move through a flooded heaven, swimming through air while drowning in water that flows upward. Marcus, or the thing that remembers being Marcus, presses his hand against the inside of the mirror's surface. His mouth moves in words Thomas cannot hear, but the meaning is clear. I'd help us. End this. Let us rest. Thomas touches the mirror's outer surface, aligning his palm with Marcus's. The glass is cold, so cold it burns, and for a moment Thomas feels the weight of water above pressing down on his lungs. He gasps and pulls his hand away. leaving a handprint on the mirror that doesn't fade. They suffer because you suffer, the Black Alchemist's voice observes. It comes from the flooded sky now, speaking through the mouths of drowned fish that swim in celestial currents. Your pain echoes through them. Your confusion becomes their torment. Every step you take toward the gate increases their agony. Then I'll stop walking. You cannot. The spell you are speaking does not allow for pauses. Each moment of hesitation adds syllables of doubt to the final word. Continue toward completion, and their suffering ends. Stop, and it stretches into eternity. Thomas looks up at the impossible ocean above his head. In its depths he can see shapes moving, not fish or sea creatures, but buildings. Entire cities submerged in the sky vault, their windows glowing with lights that burn underwater. People move through those drowned streets, conducting their lives in defiance of physics, shopping in markets where the merchandise floats free, and conducting conversations in bubbles of air. Another possibility, Thomas realizes. Another world bleeding through. The barriers weaken as you approach the gate. Realities that were never meant to touch begin to overlap. Soon there will be no distinction between what is and what could be. The voice pauses, considering. Perhaps that is for the best. Distinction is a form of limitation, after all. Thomas walks along the shore of the inverted ocean, his footsteps leaving prints that fill with water falling from above. The liquid is not quite water. It tastes of memories when it touches his lips, carries the weight of dreams when it pools in his palms. Each drop contains entire histories of worlds that never were, stories that ended before they could be told. He comes to a pier that extends into the air, its wooden planks solid, despite having nothing to support them. At the end of the pier sits a figure that Thomas recognizes but cannot name, a woman in robes covered with symbols, her face turned up toward the flooded sky with an expression of profound longing. "Mother?" Thomas calls, though he knows this cannot be right. His mother died when he was an infant. He has no memories of her face. The woman turns, and Thomas sees that she is indeed his mother, not as she was, but as she might have been, as she could have been, in worlds where the Black Alchemist's plans never came to fruition, where children were not sacrificed to serve cosmic ambitions. "My son," she says, and her voice carries the weight of water above them. "You have traveled so far." Thomas approaches cautiously. The staff grows warm in his hand, remembering mothers who lived to hold their children. The mirror shows his reflection overlapping with hers, their faces blending until it becomes impossible to tell where one ends and the other begins. "You're not real," he says. "Reality is a negotiable concept these days," she replies with a smile that breaks his heart. "I am as real as memory makes me, as real as regret allows me to be." The Black Alchemist made choices that affected us all, but those choices do not define what we could become. She stands, her robes shifting to reveal that they are not fabric but living water, flowing and reforming with each movement. "You carry power, Thomas. Not just the power to end things, but the power to begin them. I don't know how. You do. You have always known. The rules you learned, the doors you opened, the words you spoke, they were not just tools of destruction. They were lessons in creation." She gestures toward the flooded sky above them. "This ocean exists because you imagined it might. The inverted forest grows because you needed shelter from normalcy. Every impossibility you have encountered was born from your unconscious will to reshape the world." Thomas looks at the artifacts in his hands, the staff that remembers, the mirror that shows what follows, the ring that erases. Tools of power, certainly, but tools nonetheless. And tools can be used to build as well as destroy. The followers in the mirror, he says, they're not just trapped spirits, they're possibilities. Versions of people who could exist if I choose to create them instead of consuming them. Very good. His mother's smile brightens the drowned sky above them. "And the gate you approach, what do you think it truly is?" Thomas considers this. The gate he has been walking toward since the beginning of his journey. The cosmic threshold that waits in the distance like a wound in reality itself. He has been thinking of it as a destination, an endpoint, a final choice between destruction and salvation. But what if it's not a door at all? It's a mirror, he realizes, a reflection of myself. The choice isn't whether to open it or keep it closed. The choice is what I want to see when I look into it. His mother nods, her form beginning to fade as the sky vault above them starts to drain. The ocean flows down through cracks in heaven, creating waterfalls that fall upward into space. Remember, my son, you were made to be a weapon, but you were born to be a choice. The difference lies in how you choose to remember your own name. She dissolves into mist and memory, leaving Thomas alone on the pier that extends into emptying air. Above him, the last of the impossible ocean drains away, revealing a sky that has learned to be empty again. In the mirror at his side, his followers no longer struggle with contradiction. They stand in perfect stillness, waiting for him to decide what they will become. Thomas grips the staff, feels the weight of the ring, looks into the cracked surface of the mirror. 3 artifacts that could unmake the world, 3 tools that could remake it. The gate is close now, so close he can feel it pulling at the edges of his consciousness, drawing him toward a choice that will echo through every reality that has ever existed or ever could exist. Time to remember what he was made for. Time to decide what he chooses to be. Chapter 5, The Halls of Memory. Thomas steps off the pier into a space that shouldn't exist, an endless corridor lined with doors that open onto moments from his past. Each door is labeled with a date and a single word: Taught Orphanage and Odd Invitation, a Marcus, Ben Basement, Untruth, Unchoice. And through their keyholes, Thomas can see himself at different ages, making the decisions that led him here. The hall stretches in both directions beyond the limits of sight. There are thousands of doors, tens of thousands, marking not just the major events of his life, but every instant of choice, every micro-decision that shaped his path toward the gate. The final approach, the Black Alchemist's voice whispers from between the doors. Here, time becomes negotiable. Here, you can revisit any moment and make it differently. Thomas walks slowly down the corridor, reading the labels. First word, first step, first stream of falling down. The doors near the beginning are smaller, child-sized, their wood painted in bright colors that have faded with age. As he progresses, the doors grow larger, their surfaces darker, until they loom above him like monuments to inevitability. He stops at a door labeled "Unknown to Photograph." Through its keyhole, he sees himself at age 7, standing in the orphanage attic, holding a picture of 2 people he was told were his parents. In this memory, he believed the lie, accepted the story of the car accident, the tragedy that left him alone in the world. You could change it, the Black Alchemist suggests. Open that door, step through, choose to investigate further, learn the truth earlier, perhaps prevent some of the suffering that followed. Thomas reaches for the handle, then stops. What would that change accomplish? You would arrive at this moment with different knowledge, different preparation. Perhaps you would be stronger, more ready for what awaits at the gate. Or perhaps I would be weaker. Perhaps the suffering was necessary. Thomas pulls his hand back. Perhaps the boy who learned the truth too early would never have developed the strength to carry it. He continues walking. The doors become more recent, more painful, and a first whisper in the stone. But Marcus's transformation, and a headmaster's revelation. Each one offers the chance to undo choices, to take different paths, to avoid the pain that shaped him. At a door labeled Saring's First Touch, Thomas pauses. He remembers the moment when he first slipped the artifact onto his finger, the terrifying peace of being forgotten by the world. Through this door's keyhole, he sees himself hesitating, considering whether to put the ring on at all. This one you should change, the Black Alchemist says urgently. In that moment, you still had the chance to refuse the burden. You could choose a normal life, walk away from power and responsibility. Could I? Thomas asks. Or would refusing the ring simply lead to a different door, a different moment of choice? Would the boy who never wore the ring still end up in these halls just by a different route? He looks down at the mirror in his hand. In its cracked surface, he sees not his followers but himself, dozens of versions of himself, each one representing a path not taken. Some are older, some younger, some carry different artifacts or wear different faces entirely, but all of them are walking through these same halls, approaching the same gate, carrying the same burden of choice. Every possible version of my life leads here, Thomas realizes. Every choice I could have made, every path I could have taken, they all converge on this moment. The doors aren't offering alternatives. They're showing me that alternatives don't exist. The Black Alchemist's voice grows sharp with frustration. You could still change everything, open any door, step through, become someone else. You have that power now. And what would happen to the Thomas who doesn't step through the door? What would happen to this version of myself, the one who has walked through fire and impossibility to reach this place? Silence. Thomas understands. The Black Alchemist doesn't want him to change the past to avoid his destiny. The Black Alchemist wants him to fracture himself across multiple timelines to become every possible version of Thomas Blackwood simultaneously. 1,000 minds carrying 1,000 variations of power, all of them converging on the gate at the same moment. You want me to become Legion, Thomas says. You want me to open all the doors, become all the possible versions of myself, carry every path to this moment. That's what the spell really is. Not the end of one world, but the beginning of infinite worlds, all of them ruled by infinite versions of the same weapon. You begin to understand the scope of what we are attempting. Thomas grips the staff tighter. It remembers simplicity, single choices, clear paths, cause and effect, that moves in only one direction. Its memory of linearity gives him strength. I understand that you're afraid, Thomas says. Afraid that a single version of me might choose differently than you expect. Afraid that all your planning and manipulation might come to nothing if I exercise the free will you tried so hard to eliminate. He raises the staff and brings it down hard against the floor. The sound echoes through the corridor like a bell tolling backward, and every door slams shut simultaneously. I am not every possible version of myself, Thomas declares. I am this version, the one who suffered, the one who learned, the one who chose to keep walking even when the path led through impossibility. He looks directly into the mirror, meeting his own eyes in its cracked surface. I am the Thomas who remembers what choice feels like. The corridor begins to collapse around him, doors and walls folding inward like paper in fire. But Thomas doesn't run. He stands perfectly still, holding his artifacts, feeling the weight of the ring on his finger. When the destruction is complete, he finds himself standing in a place he has never seen but always known, a circular chamber carved from stone that predates language, lit by no source but somehow not dark. In the center of the chamber stands the gate. It is exactly what his mother told him it would be, a mirror. But not just any mirror. This is the mirror of absolute truth, the reflection that shows not what is but what could be. In its surface, Thomas sees not himself but every possibility that branches from this moment. Every choice he could make, every word he could speak, every action he could take. The futures stretch away like an infinite tree, each branch leading to different outcomes for himself, for the world, for the cosmic forces that have shaped his journey. And standing beside the mirror, waiting with the patience of eternity, is another Thomas, the one from his trials at the chapel, the one who chose differently, the one who embraced the role of weapon without question or hesitation. Brother, the other Thomas says, and his voice carries the weight of stars dying. Are you ready to remember what we were made for? Chapter 6, The Choice of Mirrors. The other Thomas is exactly what Thomas expected him to be, himself, but without doubt, without the hesitation that comes from caring about consequences, without the pain that comes from choosing to remain human in the face of cosmic indifference. He stands with perfect posture, carrying identical artifacts that gleam with polished purpose instead of tarnished use. His staff is straight where Thomas's is worn from desperate gripping. His mirror shows clear reflections instead of cracked possibilities. His ring fits perfectly, unmarked by the struggle of putting it on and taking it off in moments of doubt. You took the difficult path, the other Thomas observes. You chose to suffer, to question. to carry the weight of every choice instead of simply accepting your purpose. And you? Thomas asks. I chose efficiency. When the Black Alchemist explained what I was made for, I embraced it completely. No resistance, no second-guessing, no wasted time on sentiment or regret. The other Thomas gestures to the gate mirror between them. I have been waiting here, holding this space stable, keeping the possibilities from collapsing into chaos, waiting for you to arrive so we could complete the work together. Thomas looks into the mirror gate. In its surface, he sees the convergence of every choice he has ever made, every rule he has broken, every door he has opened. The reflection shows not just his face, but the faces of everyone he has affected. Marcus, Professor Ashcroft, the spirits in the stone, the dead in Millbrook, all of them connected to him by threads of consequence. What happens when we complete the work? Thomas asks. Reality becomes negotiable. The barriers between what is and what could be dissolve entirely. Every possible world exists simultaneously, and we become the architects of infinite possibility. The other Thomas's eyes gleam with anticipation. No more limitation, no more death that cannot be undone, no more choices that cannot be unmade, no more meaning, Thomas realizes. If everything is possible, nothing is significant. If every choice can be undone, no choice matters. Meaning is a limitation imposed by linear thinking. Significance is a consolation prize for those who cannot access true power. The other Thomas extends his hand. Take my hand, brother. Speak the final word. Let us begin the age of infinite becoming. Thomas looks at the offered hand, then at his own artifacts, the staff that remembers what he forgets. What does it remember now? What has he forgotten in his journey through impossibility? He grips the staff tighter and lets its memories flow through him. He remembers a boy named Thomas who wanted nothing more than to belong somewhere. It remembers the first time he felt truly seen, when Marcus offered friendship in a place designed to eliminate connection. It remembers the moment when Thomas chose to risk everything to save students he barely knew, not because he was destined to do it, but because it was right. The staff remembers choice, real choice, not the illusion of choice between predetermined options, but the terrible freedom of deciding who to become when no one is watching. You know what the difference is between us, Thomas says to his other self. Enlighten me. You were made to be a weapon. I chose to be a person. Thomas raises his staff and points it at the mirror gate, and persons make different choices than weapons do. Instead of speaking the final word of the Black Alchemist's spell, Thomas speaks a different word, one he learned from his mother's reflection in the flooded sky vault, one that carries the weight of love instead of power. He speaks his own name, not Thomas Blackwood, the identity given to him by institutions and documents, but the name that exists in the space between choice and consequence, between what was made and what chooses to become. He speaks the name of someone who refuses to be a tool. The mirror gate shatters. Not the violent destruction of something forced beyond its limits, but the gentle dissolution of something that has served its purpose and can finally rest. The fragments of reflective glass drift away like silver snow, each piece carrying away a different possibility, a different future that will now never come to pass. The other Thomas staggers backward, his perfect artifacts cracking and tarnishing as the spell he represents loses its power. You don't understand what you've done, he gasps. Without the gate, without the infinite possibilities, reality will collapse back into its limitations. People will die who could have been saved. Suffering will continue that could have been ended. You've chosen finite pain over infinite healing. I've chosen real pain over false transcendence, Thomas replies. I've chosen a world where choices matter because they can't be undone, where love has meaning because loss is possible, where people are more than the sum of their potential. The chamber around them begins to change. The ancient stone walls crack and crumble, revealing not emptiness beyond, but the warm yellow light of a dawn Thomas thought he would never see again. Through the gaps in the dissolving walls, he glimpses landscapes returning to their proper orientations, skies that hold only air, forests that grow toward light, oceans that rest on solid ground. The worlds are separating, Thomas observes, Reality is remembering how to be real. His other self is fading now, becoming transparent as the possibility he represents loses its foundation. You could still change your mind, he whispers. The ring you wear, put it on. Let the world forget this choice. Let me speak the word instead. Thomas looks down at the ring on his finger, the ring that erases the wearer from memory, that offers the peace of non-existence. For a moment he considers it. How easy it would be to simply vanish, to let someone else carry the weight of cosmic consequences. But then he looks into his cracked mirror and sees his followers one last time. Marcus, Sebastian, Professor Ashcroft, all the spirits who were bound in stone and shadow, waiting for him to make a choice that would define their existence. They are not looking at him with expectation anymore. They're looking at him with gratitude. Thank you, Marcus mouths through the glass, his reflection already beginning to fade as the mirror loses its power to show what follows. Thank you for choosing to let us rest. Thomas understands. The followers were never trapped by the breaking of binding spells or the opening of doors. They were trapped by his journey itself, by the cosmic significance of his every action, forced to exist in the space between what was and what could be, until he finally chose a direction for reality to follow. Now that he has chosen limitation over infinite possibility, chosen meaning over power, chosen to be human instead of divine, they can finally let go. One by one, the reflections in the mirror smile and dissolve into light. They don't disappear, they transform, becoming something peaceful and complete, becoming the happy endings they were denied in life. You're freeing them, the other Thomas realizes, his voice barely a whisper now. By accepting limitation, you're giving them permission to be limited, to be finished, to be dead instead of eternally dying. Death has to mean something, Thomas says, or life means nothing. His other self nods, understanding finally dawning in his eyes. And I was the possibility of a life that never learned that lesson. The path where power mattered more than wisdom. You were necessary, Thomas tells him gently. I needed to see what I could become if I chose differently. I needed to understand the weight of the choice I was making. The other Thomas smiles, the first genuine emotion Thomas has seen from him. Then I served my purpose after all, not as a weapon or a tool, but as a mirror that showed you who you really are. He fades completely, his last words echoing in the dissolving chamber. Choose well, brother. Choose with love. Chapter 7. Now I remember. Thomas stands alone in the ruins of the gate chamber, holding 3 artifacts that are no longer artifacts. The staff has become simple wood, worn smooth by use but no longer carrying memories that aren't his own. The mirror reflects only what stands before it, its crack now just a flaw in glass rather than a pathway between realities. The ring remains silver, but it no longer erases. It simply rests on his finger like any other piece of jewelry. They are just objects now, tools without cosmic significance, possessions without mystical power. They have become what they always should have been, things that belong to a person rather than things that define one. Around him, the ancient chamber completes its transformation into something altogether more mundane, a cave in the English countryside, lit by natural sunlight streaming through an opening that leads back to the world he remembers. But before he leaves, Thomas has one final task. He kneels on the cave floor and places his 3 artifacts in a careful arrangement, the staff horizontal, the mirror propped against it, the ring placed where their shadows meet. Then he speaks a word, not in the ancient language of the Black Alchemist, not in the cosmic vocabulary of infinite possibility, but in simple English. Rest. The artifacts sink into the stone floor as if it were water, disappearing into depths where they will wait for the next person who needs to learn the difference between power and choice. Thomas knows there will be others. There are always others, people touched by cosmic forces and faced with decisions that seem too large for human hearts to hold. But that is for the future to worry about. Thomas walks toward the cave entrance, towards sunlight and air that tastes of nothing more mystical than morning dew and growing things. With each step, he feels the weight of significance lifting from his shoulders. He is no longer a bridge between realities, no longer a key to cosmic doors, no longer a weapon forged by ancient intelligences. He is just Thomas, not Thomas Blackwood, the identity constructed by institutions and documents. Not Thomas the orphan, or Thomas the student, or Thomas the chosen one. Just Thomas, a young man who has learned that the most important choice anyone can make is the choice to remain human in the face of forces that would make them into something else. As he emerges from the cave, Thomas finds himself on a hillside he recognizes, one of the moors near where Eildor Hollow once stood. But the school is gone now, along with the standing stones and the impossible architecture that defied natural law. In their place is simply empty moorland, beautiful in its ordinariness. The sky above holds only clouds and birds. The grass beneath his feet grows in random patterns that follow no mystical geometry. The air carries no whispers of ancient voices or promises of cosmic significance. It is the most beautiful thing Thomas has ever seen. He begins walking down the hillside toward a distant village where smoke rises from chimneys and people live lives of ordinary significance. He has no plan, no destiny to fulfill, no greater purpose to serve. He will find work, perhaps, make friends, learn what it means to exist without the weight of the world resting on his choices. But as he walks, Thomas becomes aware that he is not entirely alone, not followed, never followed again, but accompanied. In the corner of his vision, just at the edge of perception, he glimpses shapes that might be other people walking parallel paths down other hillsides. Marcus, perhaps, finding his way to a life where his gift for seeing through illusions makes him a talented investigator or journalist. Sebastian discovering that his voice, freed from the need to speak cosmic truths, carries a beauty that could heal hearts instead of reality. Professor Ashcroft teaching real languages to real students who will use them to communicate rather than reshape existence. All the people he encountered in his journey through impossibility, now free to live lives of their own choosing. Lives that matter because they are finite. Relationships that have weight because they can be lost. Choices that carry significance because they cannot be undone. Now I remember what I was made for, Thomas whispers to the wind. Not to be a weapon or a tool or a bridge between realities. To be a person who chose to remain a person when given every reason and every opportunity to become something else. The echo of his words carries across the moors, but it is just an echo now, sound reflecting off hills and stones, following the simple physics of pressure waves and acoustic properties. There is no mystical significance to it, no cosmic weight. It is just a young man talking to himself as he walks toward whatever comes next. And that, Thomas thinks as the village grows larger ahead of him, is the most miraculous thing of all. Epilogue, The House That Remembers, 10 years later. Thomas Blackwood teaches mathematics at a small school in Yorkshire. His students know him as a patient instructor who has an unusual talent for explaining complex concepts in simple terms, and an even more unusual habit of warning them away from doors that seem to open by themselves. He lives in a cottage at the edge of the village, where he tends a garden that grows in perfectly ordinary patterns, and keeps 3 cats who show no interest whatsoever in cosmic mysteries. On his mantelpiece sit 3 objects: a walking stick he carved from local wood, a mirror he bought at an antique shop, and a simple silver ring he wears on special occasions. They are just objects. They hold no power beyond the sentimental value he assigns to them. Sometimes late at night when the moon is dark and the wind carries whispers that might be voices or might be imagination, Thomas remembers other times, other places, other versions of himself who made different choices. But these memories feel distant now, like half-remembered dreams or stories he heard as a child. He has learned to live with the knowledge that reality is more fragile than most people suspect, that there are doors in the world that should not be opened, that some invitations should never be accepted. But he has also learned that knowing these things does not make him responsible for them. Other people will face such choices. Other young men and women will find themselves touched by cosmic forces and faced with decisions that seem too large for human hearts to hold. When they do, they will have to decide for themselves who they choose to become. Thomas's role is simpler now, to be a reminder that it is possible to choose humanity over power, limitation over infinite possibility, love over transcendence. To be a person who proves that ordinary life is the most extraordinary miracle of all. On quiet evenings, he sits in his garden and watches the sun set over hills that hold no standing stones, under skies that contain nothing but air and light. The ordinariness of it fills him with a contentment deeper than any cosmic significance ever could. He chose well, and in choosing well, he gave others permission to choose for themselves. The whispers in the wind carry no messages tonight. The shadows fall at angles determined by simple geometry. The stars above shine with light that traveled millions of miles through empty space, following laws of physics that require no mystical interpretation. Thomas smiles and goes inside to grade papers and feed his cats, and live the magnificently mundane life he fought so hard to earn. Behind him, the garden grows in the darkness, following no pattern but the ancient rhythm of seed and soil, rain and sun. It is enough. It has always been enough. The end. Author's note. The Forgotten Relics concludes Thomas Blackwood's journey through cosmic horror by confronting the ultimate question: what does it mean to remain human when offered the power to transcend humanity? The 7 forbidden rules serve as both practical warnings and philosophical boundaries, with Thomas ultimately learning that some rules exist not to limit power, but to preserve choice. His final act, destroying the gate mirror and choosing limitation over infinite possibility, represents not a defeat, but a victory of human agency over cosmic determinism. The echo clue, "Now I remember what I was made for," transforms from a revelation of cosmic purpose into an affirmation of chosen humanity. Thomas was made to be a weapon, but he chooses to be a person, and in making that choice, he frees not only himself, but everyone whose existence was bound to his cosmic significance. The story ends not with apocalypse or transcendence, but with the radical act of choosing ordinary life as the highest form of resistance against forces that would make us into tools of their will. In Thomas's garden, growing without mystical significance, we find the true victory, the right to exist as ourselves, limited and mortal and magnificently free.